Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today that is just doing incredible work for law enforcement officers around this nation. It's no secret that the profession, as well as individual officers, are under attack. And a lot of that comes not just from activists and sometimes politicians, but just from a real lack of understanding of what your average cop does day to day. So I thought we'd bring in this next guest to help explain a lot of that and talk about what he and his organization are doing around the country. Bert Eyler, welcome to the show.
Oh, Betsy, thank you very much for having me.
So you are the president of the Police Officers Defense Coalition, and you're involved in part of the legislative aspect of protecting cops. But first, I got to ask you the question that I ask everybody who was involved in law enforcement. Bert, why'd you become a cop?
I always wanted to be a cop. Even going through high school, one of my things, I look back on my form for what I wanted to do was computer science or law enforcement. And I got into law enforcement, back in 1995. Before that, was in the Marine Corps from 88 to 92. And I like helping people. I like the public service. And my dad always said, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I haven't worked since 1988 when I went in the Marine Corps. And it's progressive after 25 years. Started seeing what was going on with law enforcement. So the next obvious thing to get into was helping officers. And the best way to do that is getting pro law enforcement legislation passed.
Now, you spent 25 years on the job, so you had a real literal bird's eye view of some of
Correct.
the complications and struggles that law enforcement goes through. And you and I were cops at the same time, and things were always changing, weren't they? We'd always get some new case law, some new general order. Plus, in the 90s, we went through that whole 1990s crime wave and then the crime bill, and it's very cyclical, isn't it, how
Yeah.
law enforcement works?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's ups and downs. You have, issues. I mean, like you were saying with the 90s, you had Rodney King, and you noticed, the things that happened, but it all came back around. And one thing I noticed even when I started law enforcement, you had support of, your citizens, your senior staff, politicians, state, federal, and local. They always looked out for law enforcement, like, you're doing your job. If something happened, let the process take its course. Now I'm seeing over the years that's changed. Just like an officer does something, immediately it's like they're in the wrong. And we're going from, that aspect of he or she is doing the right thing to, okay, they're the suspect. The suspect's now the victim, and it's wrong. And that's the part that needs to change.
You're absolutely right. We recently in this country, we had a terrible plane crash, a military helicopter and a jetliner. And I was, watching all the news reports and listening, and the guy from the NTSB said, we'll know more in about 6 months. And when I looked at that, and I thought, yeah, these are complicated investigations. And yet, when a law enforcement officer ends up using deadly force, the public expects within 24 hours all the body cam, all of the reports. They want to know who the officer is, exactly what was happening, all of that. How did we get there that we don't? It doesn't seem like the media and the public, and very often the politicians, and sometimes even police leadership, don't even allow for a proper period of investigation before they make sometimes crazy decisions.
Yeah, I think that comes down to body worn cameras, right? The media, like when you and I were both in, you didn't have instant video. And I think the public is unaware that it takes time You got to review it. They want it out instantly. And I think, body cameras are good, but they're also bad because you have all that Monday night quarterbacking, right? It's like, well, why they do this? Why they do that? And, you got to look through it through the eyes of the officer at the time that it took place. And everybody's looking back at it at a different angle, going, well, why they do this? Why they do that? And they don't give them time to reflect and say, this is why I did it. And you can't really go after the officer because you don't know what happened. But if that officer starts saying something, then it's taken out of context and it can be used against them in court. And we've seen that across the nation. And that's the part that I think needs to stop, is the rhetoric and getting back to supporting law enforcement.
This has been about a 10 or 11-year process now, and especially in the last 4 years, we've really seen this demonization and vilification of and prosecution of police officers simply doing their job. And one of the things that we hear uh, batted around all the time is that phrase qualified immunity. And there seems to be a misunderstanding in this country about what qualified immunity means and what police officers can do. And I have been on all kinds of news show panels where there's always a panelist that says, "Oh, you cops can do anything you want with no worry about the law." Can you explain the insanity of that and really what qualified
Yes.
immunity
Yeah.
is?
Qualified immunity is simple. It's preventing the frivolous lawsuits for law enforcement under civil liability. So it stems from a case from the U.S. Supreme Court back in the 1967. Basically, what happened was officers locked up some individuals during the time the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that that law was unconstitutional. The officers didn't know it was unconstitutional. They were doing the job the way they've been trained, color of the law. Once it became unconstitutional, then those individuals tried to sue the law enforcement officers personally for civil liability. That's when the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't matter if the law was unconstitutional. They did not know it was unconstitutional. So basically, if you do the job the way you've been trained, policies and procedures, you're covered under qualified immunity. It doesn't prevent those officers that break the law or intentionally steal or assault people thinking they can get away with it. And if we can codify it into law, it's going to protect those officers that are doing the right thing and that are good officers. And sadly, you do have bad officers out there. It happens. I mean, you have it in every profession, but it doesn't protect them. So they can be sued personally. So it's allowing officers to do their job without being worried about, okay, somebody's coming after my house, my pension, everything. And that's the norm of getting out there, is letting people know. And it also comes down to the media. You have the media, you also have some politicians that they come straight out and say, well, they can shoot whoever they want with qualified immunity. And that's not true. It's just protecting them. And I think if we can get this passed, and we've been working with Congressman Banks now, Senator Banks out of Indiana, for going on 2 years now to get this passed. And we now have HR 503 on the House side and Bill S122 on the Senate side. And we're working to get those sponsorships up. At the end of last year, we had 40 co-sponsors on the House side. We're getting back up to that, reaching out to them because it just got reintroduced. And on the Senate side, we currently have 9 senators, and we're still pushing that. And really, what I would like to tell your viewers is that's what qualified immunity is about. It's just helping officers who do their job the way they've been trained. They shouldn't have to worry about being sued. And I think if we can get this passed, it will show that, on the federal side, that we support law enforcement. We have Police Week coming up, which is 11th through the 17th. And, for your viewers, reach out to your representatives and your senators to support this bill. And I think it will also bring more qualified applicants into the pool. Because, I mean, if you're if you're certified just like you, I mean, if you have qualified immunity and you know you have the support of your senior staff and leadership, you're going to get more qualified applicants. And we have to stop the rhetoric of blaming law enforcement for everything. Because when you look at it, on pretty much 99.9% of these cases, if you look at it via video, if they would have just done what the officer said and went along with it, you're on video. If it's something minor that you feel that you're unjust, you can bring it up. But when you turn around and just start fighting, things like that happen. If you did what you were supposed to do when the officer asked you to do it, and they were within the policies and procedures, you just work it out after that. And that's what qualified immunity is about, and that's why we need to get it passed.
Well, that's the thing. Our justice system has those checks and balances. So if I pull somebody over and they don't think they don't think they were speeding, or they, whatever their issue is, they get to go to court and tell a judge about it, and the judge gets to decide, whether I'm right or they're right. And we've kind of, especially in the last 4 years, we've not we, but media, politicians, activists have been encouraging people to argue with the police, in some cases to fight with the police, to run from the police. And people of the highest ranks in our political system have made outrageous statements telling young African American men that if the police pull you over in the United States, you might get shot in the head. That's quoting our former president. That's absolutely outrageous rhetoric. What kind of response are you getting from the elected representatives when it comes to codifying qualified immunity?
We're up on the hill. We're getting a lot of support. We're getting a lot of support on, especially on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, we are getting some support there, not as much as the Republicans. I don't know why, but a lot of on the conservative Republicans, the blue dog Democrats, getting great support from them. And we're just, keep pushing through. And like you said, the rhetoric is what's causing this. And until we get that to get stopped, they're just as big as cause is the individual, the suspect that's doing it. And I don't, this I believe is a way to get it stopped, is getting qualified immunity passed, stopping the rhetoric, and moving forward. And and the other thing I say is all the representatives out there, go do a ride along, right? Go see what these officers, the men and women in blue right now, are going through, and then come back and tell me, do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in ride-alongs, in having politicians as well as media and activists too come in and do some scenario-based training, things like that. See what it's like to make those decisions in these high-pressure life and death situations. I wish every politician in this country would see what it's like for just an hour or two, what it's like to be an American police officer.
Right. And I think the ones that don't want to do it, they don't want to know, right? They have a base and they don't want to learn. And that's the sad part, is when you have a fixed decision on what you perceive law enforcement is, and you're not willing to change. Everybody's opinion can change. It's just, are you willing to go out there and learn, and not just take the media's word for it? Go out and learn, talk to the officers. Where I'm from, and where I'm living now here in Virginia, great support from the citizens of the community. And they do a lot of stuff for them, especially the holidays, police week. So I think it comes down to the community and in community relations. If you have a good relationship, everything is going to be fine. But you have some places where it's not. You try to bridge that gap, and sometimes it doesn't happen. And a lot of it is, like you said, the politicians, and is the driving force to that.
Well, and we're in an atmosphere now. I mean, we've had a big, obviously, a big sea change since November, where, really the American public, one of the reasons that they overwhelmingly elected Donald Trump was because they were tired of crime. They're tired of, I live now in Southern Arizona, and, the fentanyl and the illegal immigration and all of that, so much of that leads to crime and shootings and things that we didn't have here 5 or 6 years ago. And people are tired of being crime victims. And I know in the District of Columbia, where these legislators live at least part of the year, the crime has been off the hook. And and coupled with that is the constant, until recently, vilification of the DC Metro Police Department. Do those legislators that you speak of, do they see that? Do they
I think the
see?
majority, yeah, I think the majority of the ones that we're talking to, they do see that. And I think you hit a good point is, you have a lot of crime, and I know some of these places, states are saying, well, our crime went down. Their crime went down because it's not being reported, because they know that no one's going to come for certain crimes, or it takes 3 or 4 hours to get there. And that's because of, defunding the police. When you've, over the past years, taken the money away, you don't have the officers. Law enforcement, you get into it because you want to help people, you want to make your community safe. And we're not, I think nationwide, we're not allowing these officers to go do their job. And, I've always said, it's being a police officer, it's not all roses and daisies. You're going to have use of forces, you're going to have shootings. But the big question is, was it justified? If it's justified, then you clear the case and you move on. That's the biggest thing. And you have all these cases that have dragged out for so long. We have cases with our other organization that these cases have been going on 5, 6 years, and they still haven't gone to trial yet.
Well, and
So,
let's talk about that, the National Center for Police Defense, because one of the things, and I travel all over this country and talk to cops, and one of the big conversations, of course, is police officer mental health, and these officers all over the country say it's not the shooting, it's not having to shoot somebody that is the big issue mentally. It's what occurs after, the way the agency treated me, the way that the prosecutors treat me. We have all these Soros installed prosecutors around the country that have made it their life's work, it seems, to try and put good cops in prison. Talk about what you guys are doing on that side of things.
well, yeah, with National Center for Police Defense, we're helping. We currently have 10 officers that we're helping. Surprisingly, the most officers right now are in Austin, Texas, which you would not think that would be that way, but it is.
Travis County, for people who don't know,
Yeah.
Travis County, Texas has probably one of the top four most far left anti cop prosecutors in this country.
Yes, DA Garza. It's unbelievable. He originally, during the George Floyd riots, he indicted 21 officers for the riots in Austin. And then, beginning of his election last year, he dropped 17 of those. And these are officers that were under fire, basically rocks, frozen water bottles, setting stuff on fire, and they used their tools to push them back. Mainly their less lethal beanbag rounds, and they were criminally charged for using them. We're helping them. We have one officer in Austin, Daniel Sanchez, sadly had to shoot an individual that was shooting into his own house with a rifle. And he gave him commands. He didn't listen. And he sadly had to shoot him. And he he died there at the scene. But Daniel Sanchez is now being criminally charged. Right. And when people watch the video, even when I watch the video, the body cam, you can hear the gunshots as they're pulling up in the cruiser. So why is he being criminally charged? It's flabbergasting to me. And he still has, several officers that he's criminally charged for the riots that are just now starting to come to trial after 5 years. It's crazy why this is going on.
And during that time period, these officers, they can't work, right? They're not, most of them are not working, correct? Because they've
Yeah,
been charged with a
most
crime.
of them are just on administrative leave. Some of them had to go find new jobs. I mean, they have to work. They have to provide for their family, and that's the sad part is they got into the profession just like myself. Driven by public service, and they go out there, and this is what happens to them. And from what I understand, he also, DA Garza ran on that transparency that he was going to go after these officers. And I know Governor Abbott, he, until everything goes through, whether he's able to pardon them or not, but it has to go through the process. And I'm a firm believer the process is the punishment because this has been going on for some of these guys for 5 years. They can't get promotions. They can't move on. Some of them had to go get other jobs, to support the family. And that's the issue. When is this going to stop?
And the effect on the Austin community, these cases, when you, for people who've never been to Austin, Texas, 6 short years ago, you could go and stay at a hotel and walk pretty much anywhere you wanted downtown. They had a great music scene, all of that. That has changed a lot. Crime is up in Austin. Their homelessness, their drug dealing, all of that stuff, and their police department is woefully short staffed, and the citizens are less safe, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are. I believe they're somewhere between 300 and 500 officers down.
It's
And
extraordinary.
with that being said, is you have a lot of good officers. Like why would you want to go to Austin to be a police officer, knowing that you have all these officers doing their job the way they've been trained on trial? It's to me, it's asinine. It needs to stop. And the only one of the ways we can do it is get them out of office. But it's hard because we helped with Police Officers Defense Coalition to help promote an individual that was running against him who was a moderate Democrat, and he lost in the primary. So it also comes down to the people of Austin or the people anywhere, Minneapolis, all these, Chicago is getting out there and voting the right people in. You know, it's all about justice is about being firm but fair. And without law and order, you have chaos, and you can see the cities that have chaos. You've got to allow the officers to do their job, to go out and chase the worst of the worst, and get them locked up and make the city safe. You make the city safe, you're going to get more people to come in because I've gone down there for some of the trials. And such a beautiful city. The history of Austin is unbelievable. You got University of Texas. It's a gorgeous place. But you're right. There's certain areas it's getting worse and worse, and that's because of you know DA Garza not prosecuting anybody.
And I don't know that the public really realizes that they have the power to change this. We just had a huge election, last November, and everybody was all eating up with who was going to be president and all that. And yet we had all these prosecutorial races around the country, and they largely in these big blue cities and counties went to the Democrats, and Democrats that were not pro law enforcement, not pro law and order. Again, that's changing, but folks need to understand that they need to vote down ballot. They need to understand who they're voting for, because the police we can arrest everybody on the planet, but if there's no one that will prosecute the actual criminals and indeed are focused on prosecuting the police, that's not going to make anybody safer.
No, and you hit that right on the head because why should officers across the nation go put their life on the line to go after somebody, lock them up, do the job that they're supposed to do, and then get into court and they just let it go? I
Absolutely.
mean, but when we both were in, you went out, you did your job, were able to go to court, and they work stuff out. Like I said before, firm but fair. You guys, make that decision. You know, lesser charge, greater charge. Does it should it stand to take it all the way through to the jury? But that's the decision of the court. Our job as law enforcement, uphold the law, get it to court, and then the court decides what they want to do from that point on. And that's the scary part because they're constantly letting them all out. And
Ah, you're
you can see that nationwide.
Yeah, yeah, it's so well said. Bert, you guys are doing incredible work. Tell people where they can find you, find the organization, and how they can help out.
Sure. You can go to www.policeofficersdefensecoalition.com. That's our website. You can also donate from there. We have all our information there. If anybody is interested on what their representative is doing and how they're voting on law enforcement legislation, we do have a scorecard that lists all the pro law enforcement legislation and how they voted. I know we have a lot of new freshman representatives, so as of right now, there's not a percentage for them. It's all based on the last 2 years of the voting. So we got some great individuals up there. If anybody would like to help with the officers, you can go to www.nationalcenterforpolicedefense.com, and you can see all our cases on there, how we're helping. We do blogs, we do a lot of stuff, just to support law enforcement. And that's how your viewers can help us out. If they have any questions, they can also send us an email. We have info at Police Officers Defense Coalition and info at National Center for Police Defense.com. If they have any questions, they can just reach out to us and we'll get back to them.
I love it. We're so happy to be able to partner with you guys on the legislative side and promote the great work that you're doing for wrongfully prosecuted and persecuted police officers. Bert, thanks so much for spending.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get to talk to you. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.